Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app, O'Connor and Company.
Good Friday morning, everyone. It's 7:07 on News Talk 105.9 WMAL. It is a Friday. It is a Friday here on O'Connor and Company. It's Patrice Onwuka. And as Larry O'Connor is off celebrating his son's high school graduation, I am happy to be joined by Hans von Spakovsky of the Heritage Foundation. Good morning, Hans.
Good morning, Patrice. And I should say it's nice, sunny, and warm here in the studio while it's rainy and foggy outside in the nation's capital.
Yeah. Well, I think there will be some clearing today. Hopefully that'll touch off some more rain. You know how it goes. It's D.C. Well, at 7:35, we'll have Kaelan Deese, Justice Department reporter for the Washington Examiner, talking to us about the House Republicans investigating the use of the autopen in the Biden last days. And then 8:05, Steve Moore, your colleague and our good friend, economist, he's with the Heritage Foundation. He'll be talking to us about the big, beautiful bill. But right now, we are happy to welcome Chuck Thies, D.C. political analyst, here to give us the lowdown on what's going on in D.C. And there is a lot happening. Chuck, welcome to the show.
Well, good morning, and it was indeed foggy here when I woke up. I slept on the porch last night. What a lovely, lovely evening.
Oh, you know, I used to do that when my aunt lived near Rhode Island Avenue, but that was in the 90s when helicopters would be flying overhead, the police helicopters. And sadly, I think the crime level is getting back to the horrendous 90s. We'll get into a little bit about D.C. crime, which has just been just horrendous lately, particularly last weekend. But wanted to start off talking with you about Muriel Bowser and her backtrack, her quiet seeming backtrack on kind of the sanctuary city embrace that D.C. has had. Can you tell us more about what's going on here?
Sure, and you have to go back a little more than a decade to understand the full extent of the backtracking. In 2011, and then finally in 2011, the D.C. Council began to debate whether or not to make D.C. a sanctuary city, and very quickly and unanimously, they passed the law, and by 2012, it was the law of the land. D.C. became not just a sanctuary city, but one of the strictest in terms of the latitude to actually illegal aliens, became one of the strictest sanctuary cities in America. And Muriel Bowser was then a council member, and she voted in favor of that legislation. About 2 years after that, she became mayor, and every time she was asked about D.C.'s sanctuary city status, she not only reaffirmed it, but said it was something that she was proud of. And in fact, after Donald Trump was first elected president, and then again when he was reelected president, she issued statements, the most recent saying the values, laws, and policies of Washington, D.C. did not change on Election Day. We celebrate our diversity and respect all D.C. residents, no matter their immigration status. Yeah, that was her statement, and they posted that on the D.C. government website. Now, just days ago, when the mayor transmitted her proposed FY26 budget to the council, it included language literally scrapping sanctuary city law that she supported in 2012 as a council member. It's gone. It's gutted. There is nothing that remains. Oh yeah, there's not. If this passes the council, there is nothing that remains in the sanctuary city law that has any teeth. D.C. will be no different than it was prior to the sanctuary city laws that passed in 2012.
You know, Chuck, I could never understand why the city council mayor thought, because basically what a sanctuary policy does is it says if an illegal alien is convicted of a local crime and rape, assault, burglary, a mugging, once they've served their sentence, we're going to release them back into the community rather than handing them over to the federal government so they can be deported. Why would they think that allowing convicted criminals back into the local community, why would that be a good idea? I just don't get it.
I've never understood it. I also don't understand why when someone can't prove residency, there is not a question as to whether or not they are legally here in the country. I don't understand that. It doesn't make us safer, and it is an affront to the laws of the country. It is literally an affront. You know, I'm a firm believer that we have laws, and laws are what make us a country. And I don't believe that local jurisdictions should be able to violate those laws. I've never believed that. If you don't like the laws that the federal government passes, seek to change them. But it's shocking to me, especially in the District of Columbia, where it exists because the federal government allows it to exist.
Yeah.
And that it defies federal law. It's always been shocking to me that presidents have allowed this. And it was probably made very clear by the Trump White House to Muriel Bowser that they're no longer going to allow this. And if you continue to be a sanctuary city, you may lose rights as a city. And so Bowser's not doing this for ideological reasons. She clearly believes in the sanctuary city status. She could have spoken out against it as a council member. She could have changed the laws or not enforced the laws as mayor. This is obviously pressure from the White House, and she's buckled under that pressure.
Well, and thankfully so. We're speaking with Chuck Thies. You know, Chuck, thinking about, just what goes on in D.C. and some of the pressure that I'm sure the White House has exerted is around crime and ensuring that D.C. is a place that people want to come and visit and feel safe doing so, or federal workers can feel safe going to and from their offices, especially now that they're back in office. Talk to us about the spike in crime and shootings. I mean, it's so interesting, and they are related. Not only do we have both the violent crimes, the shootings, but we're also seeing the impact of not dealing with theft and robbery, where now CVS has announced they're closing locations in D.C., Virginia, and Maryland. But in D.C., it's 7 locations. That's going to have an impact on a lot of communities who rely on those local CVS stores.
Well, let's start at the primary roots of the problem when it comes to the looting of stores and auto thefts and other crimes that aren't homicide. At one point, just 10 years ago, when Vince Gray was mayor, we had 4,000 sworn police officers, 4,000 cops, detectives, etc., not administrators, people actually on the street enforcing laws, catching bad guys. 4,000. Today, we have 3,200, and this is a direct result of the policies of the D.C. Council. The direct result, and they don't care. As a matter of fact, they've made it clear that they're happy to have fewer police, because 3 years ago, when this problem with homicides spiked to a generational high, the council said, oh, well, we're going to do everything that we can to rebuild the police department that we scrapped. In that time, there are still 3,200 cops. That's the number there were 3 years ago. So we have to start with the fact that there are 20% fewer cops than they're supposed to be in the district. And that
Chuck,
means...
can I hold you? Chuck, hold on one second. We have to run to a break very quickly, but do you mind staying with us for another segment to continue talking about this?
Sure, no problem.
All right. Thank you so much, Chuck. It is 7:15.
WMAL, making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios. Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
So we're bringing back Chuck Thies. Thank you so much for staying with us. You had such good information, just getting into what's going on with crime again in D.C. And where we left off was you talking about just the loss of police and the fact that they are not coming back despite efforts of the city to try to recruit. Please pick up from there.
Well, that's one of the problems. There is no concerted effort by the city to recruit new cops. There is no funding beyond what there has always been to recruit. Yeah. And it's not just recruiting, it's retention. One of the problems with maintaining a veteran police department in the district are the policies that the D.C. Council passed that really limit the rights and protections of police officers. Veteran cops, when they hit 25 years or they hit the age of retirement, they leave. And those are the very cops who we want on the streets. Oh, yeah, they're going in high demand. They'll get jobs in other jurisdictions.
Yeah, but Chuck, the other problem, too, right, is that even when the cops made arrests, I mean, the prior U.S. attorney under Joe Biden, I saw a report that 67% of people arrested, he refused to prosecute the cases. So even when the cops were doing their jobs, the prior U.S. attorney refused to prosecute the cases. I saw that. I was astounded by that number. That's got to be a major part of the problem too, right?
It's a major part of the problem, as are violent juvenile offenders. Juveniles that would be treated like adults in other jurisdictions. Perfect example. 3 juveniles, all over the ages of 16, all of whom committed violent crimes, one of whom is a murderer and was serving, wait for it, a 6-year sentence. 6 years for murder. Okay, those 3 individuals were sent to a posh juvenile detention facility in Pennsylvania. We pay for that, tax dollars. They escaped. It has no fences. It has no walls. They escaped, stole a car, drove back to D.C., and immediately perpetrated an armed robbery. So when we have this revolving door of quote-unquote justice and we release violent criminals, including murderers, back on the street, we can expect there to be more crime. Because people who commit crimes, in particular murder and violent crimes, when they're young, continue to do it. They continue to do it. We're not protecting district residents from what we know to be criminals. What we're doing is we're mollycoddling criminals, and it's inexplicable, but maybe it is explicable. Remember when we were talking about sanctuary cities and how the council passed that law in 2011 and it became law in 2012? That D.C. council, there are 13 members of the D.C. council. That D.C. council that passed the sanctuary city law, 4 of those members, as of today, are convicted felons. I kid you not. Two others resigned in disgrace. So 6 of the 13 council members either resigned in disgrace or are convicted felons. So when you think about who's making the laws in D.C. and you wonder to yourself, why is it that the laws seem to protect felons and ignore victims, that's part of the answer.
Yeah, and we probably should mention, too, since we're talking about the sanctuary city policy, which protects criminal illegal aliens, that D.C. is also the city that has given aliens the right to vote. I think the only requirement is you be a resident for 30 days, which means even if you're here illegally, you get to vote. And I would think that means, doesn't it, Chuck, that if Vladimir Putin came here and lived in the Soviet embassy for 30 days, he'd be able to vote in local elections, right?
Well, yeah, absolutely. In fact, people from the Chinese embassy do vote here. We know that. We know that. By the way, when we're talking about crime, it's kind of funny. We laugh, but it's obviously tragic. And we're now on a generational tragic pace. 2 years ago, we had the worst homicide rate since the 1990s. Which is absurd because in the 1990s, as everyone knows, D.C. was the murder capital of the country. In the past 17 days, 17 people have been murdered in D.C.
My goodness.
17. Yep. So we're now on a pace to once again have a generational homicide rate. Just a decade ago, when Vince Gray was mayor, we averaged 100 murders per year during the 4 years that he was mayor. Now we average 200. The murder rate has doubled in D.C. That's completely unacceptable, and again, is on pace this year to maintain that low standard, double. So, and anything else, by the way, that was tragically doubling. If we were talking about the infant mortality rate or just children struck in crosswalks going to school, and we said, oh, the rate of that doubled, it would be treated like a crisis. No, the D.C. Council just looks at it as something they want to ignore. And I can promise you, if you call the D.C. Council today and say there's been 17 murders in the past 17 days, they will say to you, oh, but crime is down.
You know, Chuck, I would love for you to give us some light and some hope as we kind of wrap up this conversation, because it does seem like, you know, the only cause they would have to care about those murders is if the perpetrators were white and the victims were black. But we know that in these cases, the perpetrators and the victims are black. So it's ho-hum. There's no political narrative, sadly, that anyone wants to exploit, which is why they're just going to gloss over it. But is there a case for hope? Is there any hope that can come to D.C. in terms of crime and solving some of these issues?
Well, there's always hope. Myself and many others have put a lot of pressure on the council and the mayor to rebuild the police department and to toughen laws that at least keep convicted criminals behind bars. It's moving slowly, and I want to emphasize slowly in the right direction, and it needs to move faster, because when it moves slowly in the right direction, that means innocent victims who otherwise didn't have to become innocent victims. So there is hope, and although my fellow district residents don't like when I say this, I don't care. There's hope because the Trump administration is putting lots of pressure on the District of Columbia. Ed Martin started that when he was the temporary U.S. attorney. Obviously, the president has talked about the crime in this city, and I hope that the White House and the federal government continues to put pressure on the District of Columbia, because we're not solving this problem ourselves. And if you're not going to solve it yourself, then the federal government can do it here. And I'd like us to solve it ourselves and say, look, we can do this. We can be autonomous. We can solve our own problems. But if we can't, we're talking about lives. You know, I have actually been, unfortunately, to ceremonies dedicating streets to the names of children who were killed by stray bullets. A girl standing in line, an 8-year-old girl standing in line to get ice cream at an ice cream truck, who was killed by a stray bullet. Just this weekend, a man inside his house was killed by a stray bullet when a drive-by happened on his block. So innocent people are dying while the D.C. Council twiddles its thumbs. And that's unacceptable. And it's more important to me that we save the lives of innocent people than we talk about home rule and telling the federal government to stay out of our business.
Amen. Chuck, we have to leave it right there, but thank you so much. Folks can follow you on Twitter at Chuck Thies for this and more. I'm hoping, praying with you that we do start to see some real change for the safety and security of the residents of D.C. and the DMV area. Okay, coming up, we've got Kaelan Deese, Justice Department reporter for the Washington Examiner, digging in on this House Oversight Committee's investigation into who used Biden's autopen. Stay with us. It's O'Connor and Company at 7:30.
WMAL-FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station. Making sense of the news. News Talk 105.9. News now. Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
Ooh. Is that a little bit of a Madonna on Friday? Yes. Oh, Janet, you're right. Sorry. Thank you, Michael. Janet Jackson. It is 7:36. News Talk 105.9 WMAL. Good morning. Happy Friday. We've got Janet dancing you into this last Friday of the month. And as we head into the weekend, it's Patrice Onwuka. Larry is celebrating his son's high school graduation. So it's me, and I've joined here by Hans von Spakovsky from the Heritage Foundation. Hello, Hans.
Good morning, Patrice. And I know it's the start of June. I always consider that the unofficial start of summer.
That is true. I mean, at this point, you're going to see a lot of out-of-office replies to every email on a Friday. All right. At 8:05, Steve Moore, your colleague over at Heritage and our good friend, here to talk about economics, the tariffs, and of course the big beautiful bill. But right now we're happy to welcome Kaelan Deese, Justice Department reporter for the Washington Examiner. Good morning, Kaelan.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, this morning we were talking about, obviously this Biden cover-up. We know, and you at the Examiner know very well, it's a cover-up, but it's not surprising that what we're learning from Jake Tapper's new book about just the lengths that White House officials, the close inner circle, which included his wife, did to protect the president's secret, which is that he was deteriorating mentally and certainly not fit to serve as president. But big questions have emerged about who made decisions, who was making policy, who was signing pardons, who was signing executive orders, and what authority they had. And thankfully, the House Republicans, they are investigating that very question. Can you talk to us? What are you learning from your reporting about this investigation?
Well, what we're reporting is that there's going to be a lot more names, I think, that the House Oversight Committee is going to want to bring in, besides the slate of 5 former Biden aides and 1 doctor that they have teed up for us so far. But I think it's a good start, and I think that there's going to be some definitely constitutional questions, some questions about, executive privilege that's going to be waived, some of the things about HIPAA, especially concerning Dr. Kevin O'Connor, who we all know testified that he was fit to serve, but there's obviously going to be some pretty hefty questions of him on that part. But, we also have down the list, some other, deputies to the president, Ashley Williams, Neera Tanden, his former domestic policy advisor, Annie Tomasini, and Anthony Bernal, which has been a name that's been getting a lot more interest lately, especially considering the fact that, the book, Original Sin, really got into the fact of how much of an influential figure he was, just as an aide to Jill Biden, but to the over the entire, Oval Office. And so I think that, these 5 people are going to really help, get the ball rolling. But I think what we really need is some of these people who have had their, who have been pardoned. And I think one of the, the choice examples that James Comer has definitely floated often is even the president's son himself, Hunter Biden, because for one, he's not an aide, but he was also near the aides and in these meetings very closely, especially toward the end. But also the fact that he has that preemptive pardon, that astounding 11-year pardon that, he's not going to be able to invoke the Fifth Amendment on if he's asked any questions about that time frame in which he's pardoned. So, yeah, it's going to be very fascinating to see.
Kaelan, maybe I've been in Washington too long and I'm just too cynical, but given, quite frankly, the misbehavior of these aides and the way they, in essence, lied to the public, do we really expect them, if they come in and testify, to do anything other than try to lie to the committee and say, oh, the president was perfectly okay, he was mentally acute, and he made every single decision on every single one of these bill signings, pardons, et cetera? I mean, it's hard for me to believe they're going to do anything other than lie to the committee about that.
I expect a lot of bloviating from these 5 members. I think that there's going to be an effort to make it seem like everything that we've been seeing and hearing since Biden left office, and everything that we're hearing in this book is all something that was just concocted as like way to smear the president's legacy, because that's all these people can really do at this point is stand up, try to defend the failed administration that they were part of. But I think that what we need to see, though, is more of the names that have not been, raised yet. There needs to be more of an effort to bring in people who cannot lie under oath or else, face, further punishment down the line. And I think that that's going to be a problem with these 5 aides is that, they have the most leeway, I think, to get around and dance around and, be PR people, before Congress. And I think that's going to be the biggest potential initial letdown of these investigations. Now, we do know that, this is primarily focused, the Oversight Committee is getting into this through the autopen, angle. The interesting thing is that the Senate, Senator Eric Schmidt and John Cornyn announced yesterday that they're doing a parallel investigation into Biden's cover-up. And they're not actually taking, at least from the initial approach, they didn't even mention the autopen. They just mentioned what we saw with our own eyes, the ways in which, Biden's decline may have, led to, a cover-up over his mental health and like who's running the country. But I think that what we need to really underscore is we're focusing on the last minute clemency and pardons and things like that. But what about the 28th Amendment? That Biden declared via edict over a tweet. And what about what Trump is saying? He's going all the way back to the beginning where the open borders policy under Biden. He's saying that wasn't even his idea, and I think that that's something that he's calling on his colleagues in Congress to investigate every aspect of this Biden presidency. Don't just look into the things that happened at the last minute, but look into every nook and cranny. And it's going to be incumbent upon me and my colleagues to do the same and to actually, look into different, aspects of the presidency just in the last 2 years, because I think that that's when we really started to see a ramping up of the president's mental decline as well. So I think that, from 2023 onward is a good area for people to investigate.
Well, Kaelan, we have to leave it there, but we will definitely be following you. Folks can follow you at Kaelan Deese on X, because I think you're right. This is farther than just the last few days of the Biden administration, and I think people have the disastrous pullout from with Afghanistan on their minds as well, and the lost servicemen and women as a consequence. So yeah, we'll be following this, and we're grateful for your reporting on this. Thank you so much, Kaelan.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
You too. It's 7:44.
WMAL's Vince Colonnese, weekdays at noon on 105.9 WMAL.
Tune into WMAL on Saturdays at 5:30 a.m. for the All-American Book Club Show with political veteran Eden Gordon Hill. Explore ideas and stories not driven by the mainstream media agenda as pro-America books and authors from around the country are featured each week. Eden Gordon Hill arms her listeners with the knowledge and insight needed to fight back in the war on our freedoms. So tune in Saturdays at 5:30 a.m. on 105.9 FM, the WMAL app, or online at WMAL.com.
All right, coming up in our 8 a.m. hour, we've got Steve Moore, fellow with the Heritage Foundation, here to talk to us about the big, beautiful bill, plus his reflections on Elon Musk's final day. And have you ever been stuck on a plane with somebody who grabbed the intercom and just started singing tunes? Well, that happened. We'll report more on that. Stay with us. It's O'Connor and Company at 8 a.m.
WMAL-FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station. Making sense of the news.